Have you ever gotten that weird feeling? You look around and something just feels off. Like the rules don't quite make sense, and you're playing some kind of game you don't even remember starting. Well, let's really dive into that feeling, because what if I told you that little suspicion might be way closer to the truth than you think? So let's start right here, with this idea from Owen Cook that our world isn't some safe, collaborative society. No, it's a metaphorical jungle. And in a jungle, you're either hunting or you're being hunted. You're either predator or you're prey. But what's the prize? It's not about your physical survival. It's about something way, way more valuable. So let's think of this jungle as a kind of simulation, right? A construct, a program with its own set of rules. And in any good simulation, you have two types of beings. You've got the players, the ones who know they're in a game and are actively trying to win, and then you have the NPCs. Yeah, that term, NPC, it's not just for video games anymore, is it? It perfectly describes people who aren't really living their lives. They're just running a script. They're programmed by society, by the media, by their friends on what to think, what to want, how to act. They never break from that code to create something new for themselves. And this really leads to the big, uncomfortable question you have to ask yourself. Is your life force, your energy, being used to build your dream? Or is it being siphoned off to power someone else's? Are you, when it comes right down to it, just a battery, plugged into the matrix, keeping a system running that doesn't serve you? So what exactly is being taken from you? It's not just money. That's just a symbol. The real currency is this stuff. Your raw energy, your incredibly limited time, your ability to focus in a world of distraction, your willpower to push through challenges, and your influence to make a change. Once those are gone, well, you're too drained to even notice you're in a game at all. Okay, so if this is a system of control, how does it actually work? Who are the architects, and what tools are they using to build our reality? Well, the mechanisms are pretty sneaky, and they range from the psychological programming we get every single day to, well, something a lot more biological. Now, I know, this sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, but it's a real theory from our source material. What if the control isn't just in our minds, but in our bodies? The idea is that tiny parasites could literally hijack our central nervous system, changing our thoughts, our desires, turning us into puppets without us ever knowing. It's a pretty terrifying thought. But look, even if you set aside the parasite theory, the psychological programming is absolutely real. Just think about money. For so many of us, from the time we were kids, we heard arguments about bills, we felt the anxiety around rent. That phrase, "we can't afford that," isn't just a statement, it's a program. It trains your nervous system to literally feel stress and fear around the idea of abundance. So your own body starts to see wealth and opportunity as a physical threat and sabotages you. And this idea of programming, it might not just be limited to us here on Earth. Some physicists argue it's hard-coded into the universe itself. So let's zoom out for a second, way out. What if the very laws of physics are the biggest clue that we're living in a simulation? Because it turns out there are 6 fundamental numbers, 6 constants that are so ridiculously perfectly tuned for life to exist, it just seems impossible for it to be an accident. First up is a number called N. This basically represents how much stronger electromagnetism is than gravity. And get this, if that ratio was just a tiny, tiny bit different, the universe would have fizzled out and collapsed in on itself almost immediately. Game over before it even started. Okay, so the universe is stable. Great. But you still need the right stuff to build with. That's where epsilon comes in. It controls how efficiently stars fuse hydrogen into other elements. If this number was just a little lower, like 0.006, we'd have a universe with only hydrogen. No carbon, no oxygen, nothing. A little higher, 0.008, and all the hydrogen would have been used up long ago. Either way, no us. So we've got a stable universe and the right elements. Now you need the right density. That's omega. If it were a bit higher, gravity would have been too strong, and everything would have already crunched back into a single point. If it were too low, gravity would have been too weak to pull matter together to form stars and galaxies in the first place. Now this next one, this one is just mind-bending. Lambda. It's the cosmological constant, what we call dark energy. Look at how unbelievably small that number is. If it were just a fraction bigger, the universe would be expanding so fast that gravity would never have had a chance to pull anything together. No galaxies, no stars, no planets, just an empty, cold nothingness. And even if you get all of that right, you still need to form the actual structures, like galaxies. That's where Q comes in. It's about the energy needed to form them. If this number were too small, you just have a boring cloud of gas. Too big, and the universe would be a violent nightmare filled with giant black holes. Again, no stable stars, no life. And finally, the stage for all of this, D, the number of spatial dimensions we live in. We've got 3. And as it turns out, the physics just don't work for stable life in 2 dimensions or in 4. It had to be 3. So just look at that. These 6 numbers are the source code for our reality. If you change any one of them by even the slightest amount, or not here, it all just vanishes. So you have to ask yourself, is this just the most unbelievable cosmic luck of all time? Or does it look a lot more like a program that was designed? So, if we are in a simulation, whether it's social, biological, or cosmic, is there a way out? Can we unplug from the matrix? Well, the sources we looked at point to 2 very, very different ways to find freedom. On one hand, you have the path of the apex wolf, the approach of someone like Owen Cook. The strategy here is to not fight the simulation, but to master its rules. You play the game to win. You get the money, the status, the power, and you use it to buy your freedom within the system. And then there's the path of the mycologist, inspired by people like Paul Stamets. This isn't about winning the game. It's about realizing it is a game and then choosing to step outside of it by connecting with nature and expanding your consciousness. This is really the heart of the mycologist's philosophy. It's the belief that this individual you is just an illusion, that we are all just tiny pieces of one huge interconnected consciousness. And by connecting with nature, with things like fungi that create these vast underground networks, we can tap back into that universal intelligence. And here's the counterpoint, the Apex Wolf's mission statement from Owen Cook. Forget transcending the game. The goal is to beat it on every level, to experience everything this reality has to offer. You want to build things, do things, see everything. You want to get so powerful within the simulation that its rules just don't apply to you anymore. You want to suck every last drop of marrow out of this life. So we're left with 2 very different paths, master the game or transcend the game. But this leads to one last really deep question, a question about what freedom even is. I mean, think about it. What if both of these paths, the path of the hyper-successful entrepreneur and the path of the spiritual psychonaut, what if they aren't escapes at all? What if they're just 2 different endgame scenarios that were already programmed into the system? The winner storyline and the enlightened storyline, both giving you the feeling of freedom while keeping you locked inside an even bigger box. And that, right there, is the thought I want to leave you with. Maybe waking up isn't about escaping the program. Maybe the real first step is just realizing that you've been running on someone else's code your entire life. And the first act of true freedom is deciding, consciously, whose program you want to run from now on, yours or someone or something else's. That choice, that's everything.